Ladies and gentlemen, I am currently participating in an event that is being organized on chess.com known as the Team Chess Battles. And the Team Chess Battles are basically legalized chess cheating. It's 2-on-2 chess. You play a 10-minute rapid game against a set of opponents. You get 10 seconds bonus per move. You play a 2-game mini-match. And if it's tied 1-1, you break it with an Armageddon. Most teams are evenly matched. And this is the semifinal matchup where my team, which is composed of myself and Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura, took on the best power play of chess commentators, debatable, but most people agree, in the world, which is Daniel Naroditsky and Robert Hess. They defeated Peter Svidler and Jan Gustafsson, and we defeated Eric Hansen and Jordan Van Forest. And this legalized cheating type of protocol is actually quite fascinating. It's very interesting to see how evenly matched teams, evenly composed teams talk about their moves, and how teams like myself and Hikaru, who have a big rating disparity, how we go through the moves as well. And you have really enjoyed this format and have really enjoyed watching it live. And in this video, I'm going to take you through the recap of our semifinal match. So we were playing with the black pieces for game number 1. And I was controlling the mouse, and so was Robert, and that's why his username is listed there. And I had a feeling they were going to open with e4. And, I mean, they play a lot of stuff. Robert plays e4, c4, I mean, they could play whatever. I actually thought that maybe they would play a Jobava London with knight c3, bishop f4, because Danya's quite good at this, but they went for e4. I think they anticipated we would probably play the Caro-Kann, and we did. Then after d4, d5, they played knight c3. Now, in the previous match, there was a 2 knights Caro-Kann, and we played d5, and we ultimately held a very solid game. And generally in this format, you'd like to hold with black and play to win with white, which is what you do at all the levels. So knight c3 takes, and here Hikaru and I had a conversation whether to play bishop f5 or whether to play knight to f6. Bishop f5 is a classical main line. I have played hundreds and hundreds of games. The theory here is very long. White retreats, chases you away, then puts a knight on f3. Black can allow the knight here or not allow the knight there. A lot of theory. But recently I've been playing knight f6, and Hikaru was okay going for knight f6, in particular because he wanted to investigate this position a little bit. The Tartak Caro-Kann, where black has doubled pawns, very weird structure. Black goes here, castles, etc. There's another line here known as the Bronstein-Larsen, but as Hikaru confirmed in our game yesterday, this is basically terrible for long games, like 90-minute chess and top-level chess, but it's a perfectly good line for like 2,000, 2,200 and below, and it's not the worst in Blitz and Rapid, but you damage your structure, and black just gets a, slightly worse position. So pawn takes f6. Now white plays c3. We develop the bishop, so do they. And now they go for the main line, which is queen c2, attacking our pawn on h7. Historically, in this position, after giving this check and white blocking like this, white blocks with the knight, because otherwise we would have put our bishop on g4, targeting their knight. This is all the main line. So at the highest level, this has been played many times. And now white has an attack on this pawn. Now, the most natural move here by far is either h6 or g6. And then white castles, you play knight d7, and this is a very solid setup for black, but generally, white is microscopically better. But recently, one of the trendy and edgy ways to play this line is to play h5. This has become really popular in the last, 3 to 5 years. It looks really idiotic to send the pawn forward like this. I mean, you castled, you really don't want to do that. And not only that, you actually send the pawn to h4 as well, which is really bogus. But the engine actually says it's not half bad. And white also has the option to castle long. So after bishop e3, knight d7, long castles is another way to play. And then what you basically do is you get into a huge fight. But this is if white is looking for a fight, and this is if white is looking for a wrestling match, which is also a fight, but with no striking. So, slightly less blood and violence. Now here, what was funny is I was talking to Hikaru during the commentary, during the match, and I said, there's a line here that's very annoying, which is knight f4, and then white uses a backwards queen maneuver to get the queen to h5. Very annoying line. It's like the most annoying line that can happen here. And the boys thought for 40 seconds, and they played knight f4. I was very disappointed to see this move, because the thing is, if white waits to play knight f4, you can even play queen c7, And in many lines, the knight doesn't get to f4, and okay, you get into like a very, complex battle. They went knight f4, and then they went queen d1. And, this kind of shows that I'm not on the level of Naroditsky and Hess, or obviously Hikaru, but from an openings perspective, I know my openings. And I know what's trendy, I know what's popular, I know what does well. And here they played a line where, and Hikaru and I calculated here, that going queen c7 is probably wrong because we were very concerned with just a very simple g3, at which point we can't really take because then they're going to get the bishop here, which is very good. And also, we kind of didn't want to take the pawn because then they open up their rook. So there's no reason to help them. And now, in this position, Hikaru told me that there's a line that he vaguely remembers in his notes where black gives up a pawn and kills all of white's winning chances. And I found that pretty funny. So basically, I would never play this. And this kind of shows the level difference between me and a top 3 player in the world. In this position, I would play queen c7 attacking the knight. White would play g3, and I would figure something out. Like I would play bishop d7, and then, white would play bishop d2, and then I don't know, we would play chess. Hikaru here was like, you can take the knight, and then you can give away a pawn. You can play knight to g6, and we just hold. Now, I would never in a million years do this, ever, ever. And yet, the computer blesses it, and white has no winning chances. No winning chances is a strong statement, but for an engine like perspective, black wants to play h3, weakening white's light squares, and then maybe even queen d5 to create mating threats. So, and just so you're aware, like this looks scary, but it's not. And we can always trade the queen, we can always kick this queen out. So there's nothing there. And Hikaru was like, yeah, we can just play like this, and white is completely hopeless in terms of winning chances. Like I said, I would have never in a million years played like this. Queen f5 takes, a4, we bring the king, we trade rooks, and now they're going to try to beat us in this endgame. So they are up a pawn, they are doing what's called fixing our structure with a flank pawn, they want to play rook a4, and now the boys, put the rook on b4 and put it on b6. This is very instructive. Rook a4, rook b4, rook b6, planting firmly here. And basically, it's a question of, will white be able to knock down some of our bowling pins of pawns, right? So bishop c4, they play b3, we go back, they play c4. Hikaru here was looking for a defensive setup, and this is sort of the defensive setup that we landed on. It's very difficult for them to move their pawns forward. It's difficult for them to move their king, but this was maybe the biggest advantage of the game that they had. Apparently, they needed to play here, allowing our rook to the open file, repositioning the bishop and just allowing this, which was tough for them to do. Instead, they went for a pawn break, and as it just so turns out, they can't make any progress. And the most important thing is that the opposite colored bishop endgame is the draw. So bishop d2, bishop e4, but this was anything but over. Danya and Hess got down to 25 seconds and allowed us to get some pretty active counterplay with our rook. And here, Hikaru was like, we're going to win this game. Like, we're playing the win. We're going to put our rook on c2. We're going to take this pawn, start manifesting it. And then apparently Robert Hess with the call of the match. Bishop e1 played with 4 seconds on the clock. They played this move with 4 seconds because they gained 10 seconds. And bishop e1 is designed to get out of this check and attack our strong pawn. If we can take and then take this pawn and survive, we're going to have good winning chances. But bishop e1 is a fantastic move, getting out of the way to target this pawn, and now unfortunately the game is simply going to end in a draw. But it's anything but over. They have 2 passed pawns, right? They have 2 passed pawns on the open board. We have a very powerful f pawn, but now we have to make sure their king doesn't get in to help. If they start pushing both pawns at the same time, and then their king gets in over here and takes this, we're going to be in bad shape. So all of a sudden, we start shuffling, and both sides are below 30 seconds. Bishop f5, right? King d5. We're protecting the king. The pawn has made it very far. So now our bishop is stuck on this diagonal. We cannot let the king in. So their king starts going the other way. They definitely are very, very close to getting a winning advantage here, but we stop them just in time. So we stop them so the king can't get in. It's now past 60 moves, and at some point they're going to have to give away one of their pawns to make any progress. Their bishop is stuck, bishop h7, and right here they give up the pawn. So we take, And this is instructive because what our bishop can do is defend the pawn, and our king can run to create a fortress. There's another drawing technique here, which is a little bit more dank, but we do this, and we put the king on h7, and now they cannot break through. So a long, hard-fought first game. We shuffle, 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 but this is a defensive fortress, and this ends after 120 moves. A draw in the first game, a close game, but the Caro-Kann prevails. Solid draw. They played in a very annoying way. They played literally the most cutting-edge maneuver, which is knight f4, queen d1. The computer doesn't say, you know, we have to go for this, but it was practical. And even though we were under slight pressure, it's very funny, like the way that Hikaru handles these types of positions. So I was completely confident the match was over. I did not have this level of confidence in the first match that we played against Jordan and Eric, but I was confident. I even knew what they were going to play. I predicted it. I figured Naroditsky was going to push them toward a King's Indian defense. That's probably the opening that he knows best. And that's exactly what happened. I played c4, and I told, you know, we could play d4, c4, Hikaru, you know, c4. They went knight f6 and g6. The only opening you kind of have to prevent is d5. So I played e4, and then we went for a King's Indian. Now, there are many, many, many lines in the King's Indian defense, and Hikaru gave me the option to go for the 4 pawns attack, which is very aggressive, versus something a little bit more positional, but with some venom, which is h3, bishop e3. This is known as the Makagonov, one of those. And the simple idea of this line is that you want to lock the center, and then black wants to put a knight on c5, and what you do is you play g4. Knight a6, knight e2, knight c5, knight g3, you play like this, and then you develop this bishop, and you attack black with your pawns. Very complicated. They played c6, and this allows us to still go for g4, but Hikaru made the point that g4 is less good if they never played e5, which is very instructive. Like, this is the fascinating thing about just having knowledge as a 2800 level player. He said, if you go g4, they might change the plan. And if you play like bishop g2, they're going to go b5 because you actually destabilize the pawn here. Fascinating, like absolutely fascinating, because this is such a weird way to play the King's Indian, but it is there. So we switched it back to a more traditional setup. They went for e5 and then d5. This is the King's Indian right here. Black is going to move this knight and play for f5, all right? However, normally this knight is over there. Like in the traditional King's Indian, I'm just going to, you know, I'm just going to say like knight c6, d5, knight e7. Like that is where the knight is. And then this knight gets out of the way or goes forward, and then that knight participates in the attack. But the way it is in the game, the black knight is on a6. So it's over here, right? So they start coming at us with knight h5, and obviously trying to put the knight on f4, and they want to play f5. We castle, knight f4. And now we can get the bishop out of the way, like this, and then play a3, b4. But then this knight is kind of strong. You know what I mean? And some of you may be wondering, why not this? Well, that helps their bishop, right? We would never do that because we have a bunch of pawns on light squares, so our light squared bishop is the one that's supposed to be traded, not the dark squared bishop. So we played a3. I thought, listen, you know, I asked Hikaru, a3, whatever, you know, are we going to move the bishop? a3 seems fine because our bishop is pretty bad. And now we just activate our queen, and basically if black doesn't play f5, they're going to lose. So like, if they don't play f5, if they wait, we're going to maybe even open the position and just right away target this pawn, and their position falls apart. Like the King's Indian hangs on a knife's edge at all times. So if they lock the position, then we're going to play for b4 and try to knock down the queen side. So basically they have to play f5 at some point. Now, if they play f5 right away, they run the risk of us opening that center. They didn't like that, so they locked the center of the position, right? So this is completely locked. f5 is coming. And in the King's Indian defense, an experienced player with white knows how to defend themselves at all times. If you give black carte blanche, right? If black gets f5, let's say white just shuffles back and forth. What black is looking for is f4, okay? Then they're looking for g5, okay? Then they're looking for h5. And then they're looking for this. That is what black wants. Then they will come behind those pieces. The bishop is the most important piece for the black attack. The light squared bishop. In the King's Indian, if black tries to launch an attack without the light squared bishop, let's just, like, very idiotic, but let me just say something like this, and then tries to play like an attack, you know, with this, oh, this is hopeless. You have too many problems in the position. It's very instructive, okay? And so we got out of this by creating a defensive cocoon. Knight to d2. And we meet f5. And it's very important in the King's Indian. You meet f5 with f3. There is another way. I mean, we could blow up the position completely. This is another way to play, but it's wrong. Because, for example, black can play g5. You know, black can, you know, against bishop f4, black can play g5. Right, and then f4 and try to wall us in. So instead of getting involved in that, we play f3, allow this, but now we slide back. And if black just gets as many moves as they want in a row, they're going to win. They're going to completely march our king down with the help of this sniper from the corner. But we have an idea, and the idea, if you've never seen this before, looks so barbaric, looks so dumb. It looks so not classy. The idea to get out of this attack is to play rook to b1. What? It's to attack on the other side of the board? H5, but they're arriving. I mean, we are moments away from mate. No. The idea is to play b4, but it's to walk the king out of the king side. And because the center is so locked, the king is actually safe on e2. And the thing is, black's entire position is hinging on whether or not g4 will actually pose problems for white. So they went rook f6. We played king e2. We finished our journey. We are waiting for them to play the move g4, right? And then we have a decision. They can't do it now because after take, we would play here and we would win the game, right? But that is the idea. Will g4 work? They play rook h6, and now they're ready to go g4. And we have to be careful, because after g4 take, they are posing some problems. Like, if we start doing this, they're going to play g3, they're going to play queen h4, queen h1, and we're not going to be able to defend the base of our pawn chain. We're going to be in a lot of trouble. So we do have to be a little careful. Now that we walked our king to the center, we're ready to meet this move g4. And I thought, we're up 2 minutes. They're literally falling directly into our trap. We have set them this trap of forcing them into a position, but the game is going to be pretty easy, and we're going to launch an attack on this side of the board. So play bishop d7, all right? And now we had a thought here, okay? We can play rook b1, we can play for b4, okay? But then they're going to meet us with b6. And Hikaru and I kind of aligned here on a wavelength. He suggested this idea, but I was going to suggest it myself as well. There is an idea among all of this where you don't wait for g4. You play it yourself. Call an ambulance, but not for me. And the point is, if the position locks, like if black goes here, look what happens to the eval. If after g4, let's go back a couple moves. If black plays h4, the game is almost over, because you just go back and that's it. And for the rest of the game, you are defending an onslaught on your queen side. Black officially cannot get through. You put the king on g2, he takes a nap for the rest of the game, and then the other pieces go to the queen side. So we played rook g1. Now, again, you might be confused, like what the point is, but we are setting up a counterattack with the g-pawn. That is what we're setting up. And right here, I was maximum confident. I was like, we are absolutely winning this game because black has nothing. Like, black's major plan is going g4, and now we're doing it back to them. That's it. And I thought, easy peasy. Like, we have officially refuted the entire King's Indian. Like, all of the set of the ideas, everything. G4, we're coming right back down, and they have to do something. They take en passant, but they take en passant, and now we have the g-file. So now, the g-pawn that was supposed to come down is in our line of sight. So we are going to play rook g1, bishop e3. We can play h4 in some positions, right? And now here, they spent 3 minutes. If my confidence wasn't high enough already, up 2.5 minutes with an improving position, right? They went rook g6. So that rook that they brought over, that they brought back, they have 126 on the clock, and we have 649. And they still remain with one idea. And so remember everything that I've told you already. Black's most important piece in this position is the light squared bishop. So we're looking at ideas like knight b5. We're looking at ideas to get the bishop out. We're looking at ideas like knight d1, knight e3, knight f5. Put the knight on f5, trade it, put this knight on e4, the light squares. Once we get rid of that light squared bishop for black, because this knight is so bad, our light squares are going to be $1 million, right? Rook g1, we're going to put pressure here. We're going to win that pawn. We're going to get a knight to f5. We're going to open up the center. So we played knight d1. Now, we spent a lot of time on knight d1. We were considering a lot of things. We were looking at rook g1, but we went with knight d1. Probably should have played it a little bit faster, right? But knight d1, they went rook f8. They have 1:15 on the clock, and we go for knight e3, and they go to knight c7. They're now down under a minute. So their idea is b5. That is basically the remaining idea of the black position. Try to create counterplay on the queen side. And at this point, Hikaru was saying, just play knight f5. Like, we can play knight f5 right away. It actually doesn't matter that we are going to lose a pawn. The idea is knight f5, bishop takes, pawn takes, take, and we can play like rook g1, but the point is we play knight e4. So black creates counterplay, we play b3, and then we will get a knight to e4. And just in an essence, this is the position that we're going for, okay? And we have pressure on this pawn, and this pawn. And we basically can't lose, right? Like, if we play knight f5 and we trade a bunch of pieces, we're trading a lot of material, but black is stuck. Black is playing very defensively. There might be a g4 in here, okay? Like g4 and etc. Like, that is the line that we are essentially going for. Take. We can play like for knight e4. We can play rook g1. Like, these are, you know, these are our ideas that we are trying to accomplish in the position. And if they could play for g4, and, you know, we trade all the rooks and this, and, you know, we have knight takes d6, etc. Like, that was the idea. The idea was to play knight to f5. And I said, knight f5 looks good. Is there rook g1 as well? Like, do we have, you know, can we play rook g1 or knight f5? Does it really matter? Like, can we keep more pieces on the board? We talked about it. Hikaru was like, look, it's your call. You can play knight f5, you can play rook g1. And I thought knight f5 was, for me, for my level, I was like, I don't want to trade that many pieces because they have a minute on the clock. So why don't we stay up 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes with more pieces on the board? They create the counterplay, and now we play rook to g4. Now, we could play rook 3g2 as well, but that loses a pawn. But the idea is we're going to sacrifice the rook, because why else do we exist on planet Earth? We sacrifice the rook, take like this, put a knight on f5, go to the b file. How does black ever make a move? We play rook b8, knight f5. How is black ever going to deal with this knight? Now, the engine is always saying it's slightly worse, but keep in mind, black is up 2 points of material, and it's minus 0.5. So we have a lot of compensation, and they have 30 seconds. And we're going to play rook b1, get in our queen, get in our knight like this, and we're going to terrorize the black position. So they go back to play defense. We put the rook on the open file. Bishop to e3 to point at the pawn, while our king is always going to monitor the h-pawn. Knight e8. Rook b5, trying to get a trade. We could repeat moves. We play queen c3. We're slowly inching our way forward. Queen a4. Uh-oh, look at that. We're sniping the light squares. They play king f7. We slide over to the pawn. Rook goes back to g8. Now we trade, and we get in with the queen. Maybe the rook trade was a little bit rushed, but it has to happen at some point. And now here comes our knight. Rook h8. King g1. Rook h7. They're coming up with a nice defensive idea. The computer here finds queen d7. Fine. Knight a5, queen c8. We don't go for a queen trade, now we're better. This was the game plan. The game plan was, look at their position. They can't move anything. So we are going to sneak and slip in, and rook c7, and king h. All right, we're waiting, knight c6. King f6, this is our moment. In this position, apparently, if we had retreated the bishop, they are really struggling to make a move. If they play something like rook b7 trying to create counterplay, we have queen a5. And the idea is that if they take the pawn on c4, we come back with the queen and we go after the pawn on g5 because it's impossible to protect. So it actually worked. Like, our shuffling, our lulling them into a kind of a snooze worked, but instead of going for the g5 pawn and playing bishop c1's very tough, we went on the queen side, and suddenly they consolidated and they're creating counterplay of their own. Look at this defensive move, knight b8. We take the queen, they take the queen, we take this pawn, and in this position, we gave them a check, and the game ends with a repetition of moves. King f7, knight d6, king f6, knight e8, king f7. But in this position, they play this with 1 second on the clock. Daniel and Robert played king f8 and gained 10 seconds with 1 second remaining on the clock. We took the pawn, and now only the chess gods will know what's going to happen. They have a rook, a passed h-pawn, and a knight ready to attack our king. We have 2 knights and 2 connected passed pawns ready to attack their king, and it's just a scramble. They go knight c2. We get the knight over to f5. They play knight d4. We could have ventured into f7, but that seemed kind of nuts. Like, it seemed nuts to leave our king like this, but apparently if we go after the pawn on g5, it actually covers a lot of squares, so yeah, I mean, kind of tough to play like this. King e7 looks really strong, but we're getting our pawns there, and yeah, I mean, it's just a tough position. So knight f5, they go knight d4, and we push the pawn. We're now 2 squares away from queening, but after a series of checks, and they can repeat moves again, they don't. They play that move with 2 seconds on the clock this time, d7. The thing is, we're sort of at their mercy. Like, if they want to make a draw because they have the rook, they can. We're just going to play for a win. So king f2, and again, they don't play for the draw. They play rook d2, so now we start pushing some pawns. King h1, rook d1 check. Again, they can make a draw, but they play knight f4. Their rook monitors the pawn, and there is no easy way for us to kind of block the path here. So knight e3, we trade knights. Knight takes, e takes. The rook has been disconnected from the pawn, but the pawns are doubled and the king is monitoring them both. So we threaten the pawn on c5. They go after our pawn. We defend. We repeat again, and now rook to e2 is a draw. They push the h-pawn. They push the h-pawn again, and now we're stuck. Now, apparently in this position, after they played h3, in here, maybe we could have taken on c5. Taken on c5, went for something like knight e6 or knight, but the thing is, it's very tough. Like, it's very tough to understand what you are trying to accomplish here, because you're going to lose pawns on both sides of the board. So like rook c5, rook a5, and this pawn might become a queen. It's very tough. And because our pawns are spread out so far, you know, it's very difficult for us to defend our position. They force our king into a corner, and now only our knight can move. So we start giving up a pawn, g5, but here they find the killer blow. Instead of knight d3, after knight d3, they find f3. And it looks like they can't make any progress. How are they going to... They can't move the pawn. They can't give us a check. But as it turns out, they have f2. And that is unfortunate, because the rook is hanging, but the king cannot stop both pawns this close to queening. And so they queen, it's a fork. They're picking up our knight. All of our pawns are for naught. And unfortunately in this position, or fortunately, depending on who you're cheering for, we had to resign. And Daniel Naroditsky and Robert Hess moved on to the Team Chess Battle Finals. And they will face Fabiano Caruana, the world #2 and candidate, and Christian Kirilla. Now, where did this go wrong? It's very tough to say. I mean, this endgame was very unpredictable with 30 seconds on the clock. Maybe here we just had to go immediately for these pawns rather than playing knight f5. Like, knight f5 might have been a little bit too defensive. Maybe we should have went knight f7, knight g5. Like, maybe we should have just gone pawn hunting. And then, yeah, then this is very scary, because now we have 3 passed pawns, 4 passed pawns, right? Like, this is actually a very, very different situation. We might have still lost this game, but I think that was probably the final moment, because we put a knight on f5 instead. They just kind of were able to bully us with their combo of 3 pieces. And this is kind of a nightmare position. No pun intended, with knight, pawn, pawn, and rook. Maybe an engine holds this, but as strong as Hikaru is, unfortunately, he is no computer. But in reality, where we let our foot off the gas was this moment right here. And, you know, I take responsibility for this because, as I've said throughout this event, it's kind of weird being me because I could just sit there and let Hikaru tell me all the moves. And throughout our 5 games that we played in this event, I tried not to do that. I mean, if Hikaru was like 100% certain of a move, I would play it. But here, he did leave the door open for either knight f5 or rook g1. And Hikaru was saying, like, he probably should have overruled the rook g1 idea and said, no, knight f5 is better because it completely kills black's counterplay, and it's just a very practical decision. We go a pawn down, but we have lifetime pressure against black's position, and we're just in good shape. And yeah, that's my bad. I mean, I made the mistake, but that's why it's team chess battles, right? Like, we're a team, and I'm not as good as my teammate, but he's really good. So Hikaru would have went knight f5 in a game and probably put the pressure on with white and ended up winning, but I didn't want to trade that many pieces. I thought we had a major time advantage, so I actually was very happy with the rook sacrifice, and, you know, I gotta tell you, we got a pretty damn good position. Like, this position looks really good for white, but unfortunately, we did not find this bishop c1 back idea, and yeah, that's sort of how it goes, but legalized cheating for me event is over. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and I hope you all enjoyed, and I look forward to the final match. So all the best to all the competitors. Get out of here.